Oh, please, baby, please don't turn away. Please, baby, don't.
Happy Thursday, beautiful people. It's Elle Montague streaming live at Intellectual Radio Studios, Platinum Convos. So happy to see you. And today we will be talking about mental health awareness. I'm sure that everyone has seen that we have a lot too much going on in the community in which people are having mental health issues. Just recently, and I don't even want to say that this person had mental health issues because no one has officially declared it. But just recently, we had a person to go in unclothed and naked with an AR-15 into Waffle House and shoot 4 people and kill them. Actually shooting more than 4 people, but killing 4. And I would like to say when I saw his picture and his mental state, it was clear. It was clear that he had mental health issues. And even before that event, this particular person was found on scene at the White House trying to get in and was in areas that he wasn't supposed to be in, that he's been traveling around doing all kinds of things. And, with my judgment, if I'm going to self-diagnose him, I say he has mental health issues. And we have a lot of this going on. We've been talking about trauma on some of the shows, epigenetics, and how trauma is passed down through generation and through generations. And every day we see something, someone, maybe not that extreme, but someone who's experiencing a mental breakdown. So I just wanted to talk about this again today. So I'm so happy and so thankful that I was able to find a very wonderful and beautiful psychotherapist to join us and to talk to us today about mental health issues and help us to raise mental health awareness on what's going on. So today, as our guest, we have Miss Jessica. And I'm going to let you give the introduction. I always let people give their own introductions of who they are, what they do. I kind of gave a little bit of a hint, but you explain yourself and give your introduction however you want to do it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you are too kind. I am trying to grow up and be as beautiful as you are for sure one day. So I am a licensed psychotherapist, or actually I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I like to specify that because there's a lot of different paths to being a psychotherapist, and people aren't necessarily aware of that. So you also have licensed clinical professional counselors as well.
Okay.
The difference, though, with social workers is that we kind of have been trained to take in the environment because, yes, everything can be fine in your mind, but if your environment isn't right, then your mind more than likely isn't going to be right. So we're really kind of trying to look at your environment and your community and your family and generational trauma and things of that nature. So yes, I'm a psychotherapist, but one of my professors would kill me if I didn't shout out clinical social workers. So we're amazing.
Hey, so how did this become your passion, or something you found along the way?
Well, I think I've always been a critical thinker. So I always looked at what was going on around me and was like, why is this happening? Why is this person acting this way? Why is this community functioning this way? I always took a close look at the dynamics and things that were going on. And originally I wanted to be a writer. So I heard all of these really horrific and traumatic stories. And I wanted to tell the world because I was people need to hear these stories. But then eventually I was like, how do I shift it? How do I shape it? How do I change these stories for the more positive? And so I think I was volunteering at working with, juveniles.
Okay.
And my professor was like, why don't you go into social work? This is when I was an undergrad. And he's like, why don't you go into social work? And I was like, He's like, you're really good at it. People like you. You get people to open up. You get them to talk. And so I was like, maybe I'll shift from writing stories to changing them. So.
Okay. And so then you started working with started working with children, or, and then moved into this, so do you have your own therapy office, or?
Yep. Yeah, I have my own office located in Hyde Park, in the Hyde Park Bank building in Chicago. And so I was always just involved in the community, unofficially. So like, I remember when I was staying in Roseland on like 117th and Parnell, I would talk to my next door neighbor all the time and be like, what's going on? Like, you're so talented. Like, you have so many skills. Like, why are you doing the things that you're doing? And I was just always talking to people. That's just what I do.
Right.
I've always talked to people. And so after undergrad, I was trying to think about like what my next move was going to be, because my undergrad degree was in English.
Okay.
And so I was like, what is my next move? Am I going to move into writing? And I really just thought about it. And I was like, there's more that I can do. And so I applied to the University of Chicago for social work. And that's kind of how.
So have you been on your own with your own practice this whole time, or were you working with someone else and then you transitioned, or how did that work after you graduated?
Well, really, I started off in community mental health, working with adults with severe mental illness, so like schizophrenia, bipolar. And if we're talking about people harming others and shooting up places, I probably was working with some of those individuals that had more severe mental illness, like had psychosis and schizophrenia and psychotic symptoms. So I started off there, but I just got really frustrated working in like the nonprofit realm because just the resources aren't there. Everybody's overworked and burnt out. And so I decided to go into private practice. And so I've been doing that for about a year and a half now.
So that's amazing, because, that's one of my concerns, actually, I have a lot of concerns all the time, but one of my big concerns is that there aren't any resources for the people who are actually working in the field, as well as for people who are experiencing the trauma, experiencing the disorders, or that need mental health services. They don't have places to go. At one point, there was a lot of state-funded facilities that people could be, I would hate to say admitted to, but, there was a time where people were able to go someplace and just get their services, and it was funded by the state. In those days, it's like no longer, because they're not really funding those activities anymore.
Yeah, it became the prison.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of experiments happened on people too, but some good things did happen with people, and that they at least had some place to go. And it seems like now there are just a number of people who need mental health services that aren't able to get to them. It's just so crazy to me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. There was the movement to deinstitutionalize those institutions, essentially, because of like the rapid like trauma and abuse that people experience there. But so it kind of moved more into a community mental health model. So there are agencies out there. Threshold is the agency that I worked for, an incredible agency. Nonetheless, despite being really overworked and underpaid, I definitely would encourage anybody in the community who has low income and suffers from schizophrenia, bipolar, major depression, to reach out to Thresholds for sure. And they'll come to your home.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
really. That's
they
good
provide
to
community
know.
support.
That's good to know, because, I feel like a lot of people aren't getting the treatment they need. I did hear like a statistic one time that said maybe like 80 to 90% of people who do hard drugs or that go into higher level addictive activities, something other than alcohol, substance abuse, are basically using because they've had some prior mental health issues, because they're looking for the numbing feeling. They're looking for the feeling of getting some relief from their emotions that they haven't been able to deal with. And so just the last year, I guess, we've all heard about the heroin epidemic and the opioid abuse, that like this year coming up, we're expecting 60,000 plus people to overdose on opioids.
Yeah.
And so that is like a huge concern, that there's just a lot of people who just maybe they don't recognize that they need help, or they don't recognize that they have some place to go or something like that. So what would you say is like one of your biggest things that you see in your office right now, or some of the concerns that you see in the community that, really catch your attention of like needs that people have or issues that people have?
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy that you even mentioned that people self-medicate as a way to cope with trauma or mental illness, especially in the African-American community. I can't tell you how many times I talk to family members or people who are suffering from mental illness and say that they smoke some bad weed.
Oh, right. All right.
I mean,
that's what everyone says.
That's everybody's explanation. And I'm like, how did everybody get a hold of this bad weed?
Somebody put something in his drink.
And you know what? It's that chicken and the egg theory. I'm like, well, whether they smoked it and got it now, or they had it and they smoked it because they had it, they have it now, and we have to address it and we have to deal with it. Like, we can't just sweep it under the rug or pray it away. So I'm glad that you mentioned that people do self-medicate, and in our communities, like, that's what is encouraged. Like,
Right.
smoke,
Or,
drink.
people are like also shamed because, someone has a mental health issue or a crisis that, I mean, it's really something like bipolar or schizophrenic disorder, something that's just really noticeable that you're a little bit different or impacted, or yourself is not fitting in with your environment. People really shame that. And, I work with a nonprofit in which we help homeless people become self-sufficient and get them off the street, give them an apartment, give them an address so that they can sign up for their services. But most of the people have some type of mental ailment. And what I learned there is that when people do some type of self-medication addiction, it could be because they hear voices,
Yes.
and they hear ringing, or they have so much anxiety that they're unable to function, that they actually go to drugs to get rid of that. And so I was like, okay, I actually thought the same exact thing what you said, that, that's always what I heard, that somebody did that or they did bad drugs, and that's the way, that was the result of that.
Well, one of the reasons why that stigma developed is because the average onset for mental illness is between like 16 and 21.
Okay.
And that's usually around the time that people start experimenting with drugs as well. So people just link it to that versus acknowledging that that was when the onset was. And people are able to recognize that there's a difference between the person you were before and the person you are now. So they think that something had to cause it. External of maybe yourself or chemical imbalances or whatever the case may be, people feel the need to place it on an external object, I think. And so it goes untreated. But hearing auditory hallucinations, hearing voices in your head probably has to be one of the most scariest things. Like when I was working with adults with like severe schizophrenia, and the voices are so damaging. Like, imagine hearing all day, every day, like, you're worthless. Don't take that shower. They're out to get you. Kill them before they kill you. Like, these are the things that I had one client who every day the voice told them to set themselves on fire.
Oh, wow.
Every day. And they thought the voice was from God. How do you turn God down? How do you do that? And so eventually, and the voice said that if you set yourself on fire, I'll leave you alone. And so after hearing that for 20 years, she went to the gas station, dosed herself with gasoline, and set herself on fire. So talk to people. It's important.
Wow.
You can't just brush it aside. And we do that so much in our community. Oh, that's just Uncle John. That's just the way he is. Talk to Uncle John. You don't know what those voices are telling Uncle John.
Right. And then I'm sure he doesn't want to tell anyone because, how do you talk to people about something like that? You don't want them to think you're losing it. You probably don't realize that you're losing it. You're just dealing with the day-to-day of just dealing with that issue or hearing that. I cannot even imagine. I can't even imagine. And I feel like, we focus on some things like PTSD. I hear that so much. Post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what, we focus on that because it's in the media and the news. And it's actually, in terms of just, I guess maybe being a thing, it's like been a thing since the 1980s in response to war veterans, even though there was data to support that people have had this traumatic stress disorder way before then. But now we're just terming it PTSD. I think that people are getting so desensitized to say, oh, this person was a veteran or this person had a job like the police officers in which they see trauma or they had experienced extreme trauma, that we just accept their behaviors and don't necessarily push for treatment. So do you see like a lot of PTSD or any PTSD issues in your clinic with some of your patients?
What I see more of is complex trauma. So PTSD usually applies to like one traumatic event versus, and what you really see in terms of a person's lifespan, like they've experienced trauma time and time and time again, over and over again.
So is this like regular everyday type trauma? Like what I call everyday type trauma is like, what is it? Maybe your parent was an alcoholic and beat your mother, physically abused your mother or screamed and yelled at you, or a stressor of bullying, or, so what type of repeated trauma are you really trying to trying to describe or explain?
It can show up in all kind of forms. Like, yes, it does show up in those like more like acute forms of like rape, abuse, neglect, but it also shows up in like minor forms that people don't understand, like how significant the impact is, like a breakup.
Really?
I think a breakup is probably one of the most traumatic events that people can experience in life. And at least, yes, it impacts people on another level. I think I see people get over death way faster than they get over a breakup, because it's a grieving process still. And you have to grieve knowing that that person is on the same earth as you. And you might actually see them scrolling down your timeline. So yeah, it can show up in minor traumas like that. It can show up in micromanaged at your job, or being harassed at your job, or
losing a job.
So we're talking about the war vet. So imagine a war vet had a dad who was abusive and alcoholic. And then he went away to war and saw he murdered people, or saw people get murdered in front of him, or was just isolated from his family for years. Come back home, can't find a job, gets a girl, she loses, he loses her because of his PTSD symptoms, and now he's homeless. Repeated trauma over and over and over again. So I see a lot of complex trauma for sure.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. And you know what? I'm saying that it's crazy because I feel like it's just so believable. Because as for me, I feel like I'm traumatized every day that I look on Facebook.
Yeah.
Like some days I look on Facebook, especially if I see a Facebook Live. Oh, that one Facebook Live that the girl accidentally shoots the guy in the head while she's sitting in the car. She's playing with the gun and he's sitting in the passenger seat, and she pulls out the gun, puts it to his head, and actually shoots him. And it's real.
Yeah.
Blood is coming out of his head, and they jump out of the car and run. When I saw that, I wish that I had never saw it, because the moment that I looked at it, I felt my heart. I felt like vomiting. I felt like extreme sadness. It impacted me the whole day.
Yeah, no, that definitely happens. What we do is mirror people's emotions. Like, if you notice, like when I yawn, you'll yawn. So when you see trauma, you feel trauma, you experience it, maybe not to the same level as what the person who experienced it did, but you're experiencing it. Like, those emotions you're mirroring those emotions as well. And
it's making me sick. So let's just step back just so that we all understand, like, exactly, so we can identify what exactly is I guess maybe the psychotherapist version of the definition for trauma, so that we all are on the same page.
So trauma is when you experience an event that has an impact on you, essentially, and it can affect you psychosocial, emotional. So it can affect you mentally, physically, emotionally, socially. So usually trauma impacts most areas of your life for us to categorize it as a trauma. It impacts every
aspect of your life.
Yeah, every aspect.
Yeah, especially like when, I felt like vomiting. So that let me know I already had a physical response. Something was released in me that made me want to lose the contents of my stomach.
Gotcha.
And it really concerns me how much we see and how much exposure that we see, especially our children, because a lot of chronic illnesses are associated with trauma and how we deal with trauma. And if we don't deal with the trauma, of course, it exacerbates to something that we don't want to, deal with in the future, possibly heart attack, or something like autoimmune diseases are linked to trauma sometimes. And a lot of the worst that we can see in terms of biological chronic disease is when the trauma actually happens during early childhood trauma. So it concerns me that children can see these types of things on social media, and they are rerouting their brains, in response to something that has nothing to do with them, just something they witnessed.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, trauma does affect you on a physiological level. It does rewire your brain. It does impact the chemicals in your brain. And when you start off at such an early age, witnessing trauma, experiencing trauma, being a participant in trauma, there's no way that it's not going to shape the trajectory of your life. It's one of the reasons why the holistic approach is so important. Like, you have to address people on the physiological level, and you also have to address people on the mental health level as well. It's a system. It goes hand in hand. So when I'm doing therapy with people, we start off at the foundation. We start off with adrenal support. And so when I say adrenal support, so the adrenal gland is one of the things that are like heavily impacted by trauma.
Okay.
And so there's some things that you can do to support the adrenal gland and make it function better, which is the basic blocks of life: eating right, sleeping right. Sleep hygiene is so important. Like, I can't tell you how many people are on my couch and they're so like baffled by why they're experiencing these symptoms. I'm like, I always thought of how much do you sleep? How much sleep do you get?
Okay, so let's talk about that. So what should be our proper sleeping?
Science says you need to get between 8 to 9 hours, and that scientifically some people need 9 hours.
Wow.
Anything under 6 hours can, on a consistent basis, can like shave like 20 years off your life. It's crazy.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, that's really crazy. It's got my mind going, because based on like the type of society that we live in, it's just a super hyper society where we're just going. We're trying to cram as much as we can into 24 hours as we can. And I'm doing that too. So I'm thinking, okay, I don't know what level or what score I'm going to have. I'm going to have to be in your chair, because I'm witnessing trauma. And I probably have some childhood trauma going on somewhere. And now I know I don't get proper sleep because I'm reading all night. I read all night. Like, I have this book here, The Body Keeps the Score. I brought it today just in case I wanted to reference something. I read the book so I could get some psychology in me. But, I'm up reading, I'm up doing stuff, and I'm not, sleeping properly. I know that I'm not.
You got to get sleep in. And you know what? I try to really help people prioritize sleep, and they don't think that it's a priority because they have so many other like pressing issues to handle and so many other things that they want to accomplish in a day. But what you realize is that if you're not getting your full sleep, like, your brain is fuzzy, you're cloudy, like, you're taking longer to get those tasks done than you should have anyway. You're taking longer lunch breaks, you're taking little mini naps, like power naps. And really, if you just took your 8 or 9 hours, you would be way more productive throughout the day. You'd feel better mental health wise. You'd probably be less depressed. You'd have less anxiety. And you would see that investing in yourself is really an investment in the rest of your day as well. So, and I always encourage people to not read before they go to sleep.
Really? Why?
No, anything that gets your mind working, put it away.
Oh my goodness, that's the only time that I have to read. So when do I need to read?
Set aside time to read. Maybe they say you only need like 2 hours a week to become an expert in anything. So I take a Sunday, maybe 10 to 12 o'clock, and dedicate it to reading.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Put 2 hours aside a week to reading, something that you enjoy, something that you want to invest in yourself. But sleep is going to be the biggest investment in yourself. Automatically.
Okay. You said eating, fitness, good sleep hygiene. You call it sleep hygiene.
Sleep hygiene.
And what else?
A support system.
A support system.
You got to develop one. And I know people have been dealt pretty crappy hands in life where like their friends are pretty not reliable, family's not reliable. But I always encourage people to collect real people. You have to get a team of real people around you. And it takes time. And you're not going to do it in a year or 2 years. Like, I've collected real people throughout my lifetime, meaning when I meet somebody that seems genuine and transparent, invested in me and my growth, I build a rapport with them. I follow up with them. I remember their birthday. I reach out to them, and I try to really keep them in my life.
Okay.
Like, it is so important to keep real people around you.
So how about people who are just kind of like stuck? I'm not going to say stuck, because nobody's stuck. But, you have people in your family. Those are the people that are the hardest to detach from. That are like emotional vampires on you, that are constantly creating churn, draining on you. So would you make a suggestion, like maybe limiting time with that, or
definitely, I would encourage.
What would you think?
Definitely, I would. I encourage people to invest in people that are invested in you, and divest from people that aren't invested in you. But that doesn't mean you have to cut people off. And in our society, like, people really hate a gray area.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you have to discommunicate or excommunicate a family member.
Just reduce the time.
Just reduce the time. And when you are around them, have a clear assessment of who you're dealing with.
Okay.
Don't set yourself up. I see people time and time again set themselves up for this cycle of failure. So they're looking for something from somebody who will never give it to them. I'm not going to say never, but at that point in time will not give it to them. So they're looking for love from this individual who, for whatever reason, is not in the capacity to give that to them. Stop doing it to yourself. Break that cycle. If mom is not going to love you back, it's nothing wrong with taking a step back.
So these things that you're telling us as tips, are these tips to help us deal with everyday trauma so that we're just like at a healthy state? But what if we are experiencing like more than that? Let's just say I'm having a lot. I don't want to say a personality disorder. Let's think of something that's very easy. Well, nothing's easy. Or I'm going through a financial situation that's causing a lot of stress on my life, and I'm gaining weight, and I'm losing hair, and I come to your office. What type of treatments or what types of tools do you have in the toolbox to help me deal with, like, is that everyday stress and anxiety that I'm describing? I don't know.
Yeah, I would think so. I think that's an everyday stressor for a lot of people. Financial strain.
Okay, so
definitely.
What kind of tools would you have in your toolbox to help assist me get back to baseline normal?
Well, it's a two-part approach. One, we need to focus on symptom reduction. So you mentioned that stress was high and that you were losing hair. And to me, that sounds like you're not sleeping.
Okay.
And you're not eating right. So we're always going to start with symptom reduction, because when you walk in my office, things are so intense. That's why you're there. So I want to reduce the intensity levels and how frequent you experience those symptoms. So at first, we're going to start off with symptom reduction. And there's a lot of things that we can do around symptom reduction. And I really try to tailor it around the client, because there's not one shoe-fit-all approach to people. But again, I start with the basics. What are we eating? What are we sleeping? How are we sleeping? Are we exercising? I start with the basics for that. And then we're going to go on to grounding techniques. And so grounding techniques is just how do you reach baseline?
Okay.
And there's a lot of different ways to do that, whether that's from like mindfulness techniques, whether that's through deep breathing, whether that's through talking to people, like developing a safety plan. There's a lot of different things that we can do to like manage.
Let's talk about mindfulness. I always hear people throwing around mindfulness, like especially when they want to talk about yoga, meditation. So in terms of psychotherapy, is mindfulness similar to meditation, or is it something totally different?
I wouldn't say that it's totally different. I think that they all are a part of the same strain, if that makes sense. What mindfulness is figuring out how to live in the present. So we're not living in the past. We're not living in the future. We're really focusing on the present. And in order to do that, you need to activate your five senses. So your touch, your sight, your hearing, your smell. I'm sure I'm missing one. Touch, maybe, I think. So it can be just as simple as so one activity I tell people to do is identify something in the room where you can activate all five senses. So whether that's just looking at this book. What does it feel like? Okay, it's soft, it's smooth, it has a leathery texture. What does it smell like? Smell the book. Just take a moment.
Lick the book.
Yeah.
Do you tell them to lick the book?
No, I don't tell people that. But that's what it is to be present.
I was going to say, I might question that.
Hey,
but there are some things I do like licking, but it maybe not this.
Hey, now.
Some chocolate or something like that.
No, that's definitely one that we do. Like sometimes I'll just give people a mint.
Okay.
You can really do it with food for sure. Sometimes I'll just give people a mint.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just take a minute to be present with a mint.
I really understand that and feel that, because with meditation, I'm all about meditation. I meditate every day, 30 to 45 minutes. I started out actually only doing it 5 minutes and then 10 minutes and then moving my way up. But now I can't live without it. If I don't meditate every day, I feel like drained. It's almost like missing a meal if I'm not meditating. And so I was reading something about, people find it hard to meditate because if they sit still and are forced to be in the moment, they actually have time to think about themselves. They have time to think about who they are. They have time to think about how they feel. They don't have, and if you are just racing from one thing to the next, you're allowing yourself to be numb and feel nothing in the moment. So with trauma, I guess it is, and you correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not a psychotherapist. I have a chemistry background. So with trauma, the person is basically reliving the feeling that they had associated with that trauma over and over and over in the present. And they're not basically allowing it to become a memory without feeling. So when you're sitting, you're just with that feeling that you don't know, you don't have anything to do with. You know, you don't know what to do with it.
No, I think that's very insightful and pretty accurate. So meditation or mindfulness practices aren't appropriate for everybody, especially depending on like where you're at in your growth process.
It's not appropriate? You would not suggest it?
No, not for everybody.
I love it.
For people that struggle with schizophrenia, can you imagine sitting there and trying to meditate with 4 different voices shouting at you? And trying to focus on those 4 voices, or trying to
okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Or just like that example that you gave with trauma. I think especially for people that suffer from PTSD or complex trauma, there's a lot of work that I'm going to do before we practice meditation. We're going to have to figure out like, how do you ground? How do you get back to baseline? How do you deal with those sensations of trauma? So when I say sensations of trauma, like re-experiencing. So you're sitting there meditating, and now you thought about your father's breath when he was drinking, and now you're having anxiety.
Right.
Like, we have to have developed some really good tools for you to deal with that before I'm going to transition you into mindfulness or meditation. But I think that there's a big like misconception about like what mindfulness is, or even what meditation is. A lot of people look at it as like you just need to sit there with a blank mind, and that's not the case. How I always use this analogy for mindfulness. So originally, prior to mindfulness, you're in a stream. You're standing in the stream, and the water is your emotions. And the water is carrying you away. It's eroding at the rocks around you, like the sand is falling in on you.
Mm-hmm.
What mindfulness is you stepping out of the stream and just observing it, just watching it, not feeling like I need to shape it, I need to control it, I need to shift it. So it's just you saying, I'm anxious, and it's okay to be anxious. I'm upset, and that's okay to be upset. I'm angry, and this is why I'm angry. But you don't feel the need to control it, to act on it, to
I get it.
It's just observing. And that's what mindfulness is. It's just observing what you feel and getting in touch with what you. So it's okay if all of these thoughts are flowing through your head when you're meditating. Just watch them flow. But don't feel like you need to act on it. Don't feel like you need to change that emotion.
Yes, I agree, because a lot of people do think that when they're meditating, they have to empty their head. But no, you're just aware. And like when I am meditating, I am aware of my fingers, my toes, my elbows. I just become aware of my body, how I feel when I'm sitting, my breath, my thoughts, if I am thinking, what are they? But, I'm just slowing down, slow, so slow that I'm not thinking about tasks. But I do allow visions or images to pop in my head, and I recognize what they are. And then, and I keep on going. And when I'm doing that, maybe because I'm just breathing at a pace that feels good to me and comfortable, I start to feel like a rush of happiness, happy juice, or maybe the dopamine. And, it's a very good self-healing type thing. And so is that basically the same thing that you're experiencing, or you're working with your patients, or
I think
similar?
I think one of the things that I really try to focus on is just people getting in touch with like, what are they experiencing? What are their emotions? And meditation highlights that, like, because when you're sitting there trying not to think, you start thinking.
Right. You do.
But you're just sitting there and you're just allowing yourself to think versus acting on emotions. And I think so many mental health issues arise because you feel the need to act on an emotion. So you're angry. So you go fight something. You throw something. You break something. All meditation and mindfulness is saying, I acknowledge that I'm angry.
And it's okay.
It's okay to be angry. And now that you've acknowledged that you're angry and that you've sat with that emotion, now you can address whatever problem it is, and you're not reacting off the emotion. You're just addressing the problem.
So is that one of the issues that people have? We're calling just everyday stress, this category here, is that, people don't expect to have any other emotions other than happy juice emotions. Like it's not okay to be angry about something. It's not okay to be sad or, depressed sometimes. You're not always up. I can be up and down, and that's fine. Is that one of the issues that a lot of people have?
I think so. I think that's where a lot of mental illness stems from, is trying to repress those other emotions or avoid them or deny that they exist, because America says we're only allowed to be happy. That's the only emotion that we should show. If you show up to work and you're sad and you tell your boss that you're sad, he's going to look at you like, that's not my problem.
Right.
And if you talk to your friends every day and tell them that you're sad or you're anxious or you're upset, eventually you're not going to have friends. And so that's what America has taught us. Like, we're only allowed to show happiness. But what we do know is that these other emotions are very much a part of our experience. And honestly, those other emotions might be more valuable, to tell you the truth. I've seen more people get motivated from anger. I've seen more people get motivated from sadness, from frustration, from anxiety, than I ever seen them get motivated from happiness. Once we start allowing those emotions to be a part of our experience, think about, like, when do people find God? After a breakup, in jail.
Yeah, after they've been through something. I was down and out. I was hit rock bottom. I was at the bottom, and now I got to come up. So it's, I guess the same thing is that you don't appreciate a sunny day until you have a rainy day.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to feel that.
Yeah. You have to allow those emotions to be a part of your experience and figure out, like, how to make them valuable, and address them. So, like, a big defense mechanism that people don't talk about. So we talk about repression and avoidance and denial, but America does not talk about sublimation. Sublimation is a defense mechanism where you experience something traumatic or something happens to you, and instead of addressing it, you funnel that energy into your work, into working out, into exercising, into your family. And it's one of the healthier defense mechanisms because you're super productive, you get all of these things done, but you're still not addressing the issue. So it's still a form of avoidance. And so I always use this analogy with people. It's like anything that we don't talk about is like a little nasty seed inside of you.
Yes.
And the more that we sublimate it or avoid it or deny it, it's like we're watering it, and it grows until it's like splashes out in anxiety, self-doubt, isolation, depression. And it's like we have to uproot that nasty seed, and we have to talk about it.
Oh, this makes me think of this story I heard about a woman. She was like this ultimate, like, black belt, like taekwondo, karate, martial art. Like, she was like boom, 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 beating everybody in all these competitions, like a nationally renowned fighter. Right. And she actually was attacked and raped by a very small guy. And so part of the story was, how could this happen? She didn't fight him or whatever. And how could she, allow this to happen to herself? He just, attacked her from the back, and she did not even defend herself. And she was raped, which was a horrible thing. And as they delved in more into the story, it was discovered that as a child, she was sexually molested. And when this occurred, because she never addressed those issues, she froze. And I guess they labeled it de-skilled. She froze. She didn't use any of her skills. And that was her response. And it wasn't necessarily her response to that attack. It was her response because she never dealt with what happened to her before. And she had the skills to defend herself, and she wasn't able to use it.
Yeah. She regressed to that previous state and re-experienced that previous trauma. And because she hadn't learned that was a trigger, or that it was a trauma, she never figured out how to deal with the aftermath of it.
So, and it brings up so much to me, because, if we're saying, we're going to think this through rationally, if we're saying like 90% of people, Americans, have experienced some type of trauma, and we have not gone through, going to someone to get a health check, mental health check, to help us identify what it is and what the triggers are for it, we're all open to be kind of like, I guess, de-skilled. They said de-skilled. That don't even sound right. Like, I guess, disarmed.
Yeah.
when the trigger occurs, like, because we don't know. We're not addressing it. We're not figuring it out. If someone comes into your space and they do something that you don't like, and, a person who yells out of nowhere because they hear something or something is said to them, it could be a trigger from something before, and that's the response. And we never fix it or figure out why,
Yeah, no, I see it on my couch all the time. I just had a client on Wednesday who we were talking about how she freezes up during staff meetings. And it's because her boss is somewhat like domineering and like really is a reflection of what her dad used to be like. And so just being in the same room as this guy who reminds her of her father shuts her down, and she can't even talk. I mean, completely freezes. And this is somebody that's like highly intelligent, highly motivated, highly successful. And she just couldn't figure it out. Like every time I get into a board meeting, I completely freeze. And so you see it all the time, how you interact with your partner. You'll see a lot of times women go into like a childlike state with their partner. And you're wondering, like, where did that come from? Like, she just turned into a baby. It's just like in 2 seconds. And usually it stems from something in their childhood. So I was talking to you a little bit before the show about cognitive behavior therapy. And one of the things that I think is so important about cognitive behavior therapy is that we sit down and we identify like what your core beliefs are, core schemas are. And that's basically like the lens that you see the world out of. And it was created early in childhood, usually. So an example that I use is, your dad divorced your mom when you were 4. That's one of your earliest memories, is dad left. And then you fast to 6th grade and your dog runs away. You fast forward to high school and your best friend moves away. College, your boyfriend breaks up with you. Abandonment. But at that early age, when your dad left, you developed the core belief that everybody will leave me. And that's the way that you see the world. So now you start to push people away. And you don't even know that you're doing it. But you're like, why don't I have successful relationships? Exactly. I can't find anybody. Nobody wants me. I'm not good enough. Because you're sabotaging yourself, self-sabotaging. Yeah. And you don't know it. Yeah. But there's so much insight into just knowing that there's that connection from your childhood, and just so much empowerment in knowing that that's a dynamic that you do. Because the more insight that you have, you can figure out when you want to pick that dynamic up. Because usually that dynamics were developed as a defense mechanism for something. Like you needed to protect yourself from somebody or from people that would leave. And that was helpful for you at some point, and then you outgrow it. So it's so much power in just knowing. So now you know I can do that when I want to, and I can put it away when I want to. But when you haven't developed the insight, you're have no control. Yeah, you're not in the driver's seat. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot to think about, because, you're really, really sharing some good information, because I think, we want to, as people, we want to be connected. I think this is just my philosophy, but as a people, we want to be connected as a whole in the universe, because we all should be connected to one another. But if we can't connect within ourselves in a healthy way and create a healthy vibe to push out to connect, we're missing out. We're missing missteps of getting to where we need to go in terms of our destinies, because we just don't have the energy. We just can't vibrate higher. We can't get to that frequency we need, because we are not filled and fueled in ourselves. And it's so hard to stop with this pace that we have, just to make it day to day, work, school, friends, kids, relationships, just getting from point A to point B, paying bills, to stop and say, how do I feel up? Am I deficient? Am I not there? Am I not at baseline? And who do I talk to about it? Who's going to actually care? Because if you say, hello, how are you? People are expecting you to say, oh, great, I'm having a great day. If you say something other than that, and they're already busy, they want to keep it moving, and they want you to keep it moving too, right? Yeah. And so, I think you're bringing to light so many good things, because what you're saying is, if we don't get, this is how I'm interpreting. If we don't get at least the baseline, we're never going to have a chance to reach the heights of where we need to go. Just like your client who
freezes up when she sees someone, a person, employee that reminds her of her father, that could impact her ability to perform her job. That could impact her ability to get to the next promotion.
Yeah. And what we did see is that it showed up in like every walk of life. It showed up how she interacted with her kids. Like her kids were able to shut her down that way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it showed up in every walk of life, like this dynamic that you had with your father as a child, and it impacts every walk of life. And until you understand how it impacts you and where that stemmed from, you'll never be in a driver's seat. Like self-awareness is definitely the path to elevating those vibes for sure.
Right. And then with the biology of trauma is that when you have a trauma, basically the part of your brain that helps you become self-aware turns off.
That goes back to the adrenal support.
Turns off.
Yeah.
That's why she couldn't even speak, because the front of her brain turned off. She felt emotional. She had a previous trauma. The frontal turned off. Couldn't speak. Just only feeling. It's crazy. So, it's like mind-body connection. The spirit, mind-body spirit connection. All of it, all together, holistic. We are many trinities. Yes. We are many trinities, that it all has to be working together.
And I'm glad that you said that, because so we talked about like the pieces of the puzzle. So science says, and it's very clear, like science says time and time again from studying people, that there is a science to this. Like if you get these pieces to the puzzle, you will be a happy individual for the most part. So we talked about having the physical health, having the support system, having your basic needs met. So food, water, X, Y, and Z. Another big piece of that puzzle.
Sleep and sex.
Look, that's high on the list. That's high on the list of basic needs. Sleep and sex for sure. Science definitely says the more sex you have, the happier you'll be. So get it in Chicago safely. But spirituality is another piece that a lot of people ignore. And I told you I have a holistic approach to the way that I do therapy. I'm very eclectic, and we are going to touch base on the spiritual. And a lot of people don't think that like therapy and spirituality go hand in hand, like
because are they thinking religion?
Yeah, they think religion. I think for a sense, and for whatever reason, especially in the African American community, like they're always like opposing forces. They're like, church, therapy? No, I have God.
I went to church on Sunday. I should be fixed.
But I never want to minimize the impact of spirituality. And it doesn't have to show up in like the structure of religion. But whatever the case may be, science does say that you have to be invested in something outside of yourself.
Okay.
You have to be invested in something, whether that's animals or Buddhism or Christianity or yoga, whatever the case may be, you have to find something outside of yourself to enhance your level of spirituality or whatever you want to frame it to be a happy, healthy individual from what science says.
It makes sense. So, you shared a lot of information with us. So what would you say I'm going to put you on the spot. If there was like one thing that you could fix, or one thing that you see as a big issue that just like hurts your heart, if you could fix it, what would it be?
Are we talking about like political and the mental health? There's a lot. There's a lot going on in America right now that breaks my heart day to day.
I know, right?
Day to day.
I see it on Facebook. So no, let's limit it to the mental health space.
You know what breaks my heart is I think and this affects everybody, no matter what age they are, no matter what their socioeconomic status is, no matter what their race is the expectations that people put on themselves, like the pedestal that people put on themselves. Like people put themselves on a pedestal day in and day out, and they set themselves so high that when they don't reach it, it really creates more self-doubt, low self-esteem, negative thoughts. Like even about when I talk to people about self-care, like I'm like, we got to think about something to do to take care of yourself. So people have set some really ambitious goals. Like I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week. And when they don't go 5 times a week, they feel like crap. Like they just beat themselves up. Like they are so mad at themselves. And you know what I always tell people is that it's how busy life is. If you can do anything for yourself, I want you to throw yourself the biggest parade. If you ate something good today and that was just for you, if you took a hot bath, if you had an hour conversation with your friend, if you just did something for you, I want you to be your biggest cheerleader, pat yourself on the back. And if you didn't do it, Let
It's
it go.
okay.
It's okay.
It
Let
is
it go.
okay.
Stop holding yourself to an unrealistic standard. And I think that's also like just a big piece of mental illness. Is just that people are feeling like, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't do this. And everybody usually does it. We're all human, and we have to stop putting ourselves on that pedestal. It just breaks my heart day in and day out, like how people punish themselves.
Yes, yes. And you know what? That is something that I think is a struggle for most people. And I see it as, well, actually, what I try to do for my self-care, because of my clinical counseling class, where you have to say self-care for yourself, is try to do something that's my passion. So if I have a job or my lifestyle does not include at this time full time what I love to do, my self-care is allowing myself time to do that thing. So if I love to write, writing is my passion, I don't have time to write, then if I want to take care of me, I said I schedule in a day that I'm going to go writing. If painting is my thing and I don't have time to paint, I can't take a class. I put money aside and I go to Bottles and Bottega and get a glass of wine and I paint with the people. If I want to get away for a little trip for myself, if I don't have the money, I'll go and sit by the lake. I set that time because I try to kill two birds with one stone, because I think a lot of times, just my opinion, people also spiral down because they've created these lives based on expectations from other people, and they're not even doing what they feel in their heart they want to do.
Yeah.
They're doing what they're expected, or we're just doing whatever's necessary to pay the bills.
I completely agree. But you know what? If you didn't make it to Bottle and Bodega, that's okay too.
Yes,
that's okay.
I don't make it.
That is okay too at the end of the day.
Yes.
And you know what? I think that people make self-care such a big activity. And whether it was just you doodling on a napkin because you love art and you're passionate about art, but your life is so busy and you took 5 minutes to doodle on that napkin, and really just take a moment to use your five senses and think about, like, how did that feel? How did that make me feel? What did it touch like? What did it smell like? And just taking a moment to be mindful of that doodle, that's self-care. Like, you can incorporate self-care into your day-to-day.
We just have to change the way how we think about it.
That's it. Just taking a moment to be mindful, not thinking about what I have to do next, what I just didn't do or need to do. Just taking a moment in the present to do something that you enjoy. And it's just as small as drinking some apple juice or texting somebody that you've been meaning to text. It doesn't have to be this big laboring activity. And when we don't do it, we feel.
That's how I feel right now, because I'm supposedly working on my summer body, and it lasted for about 2 weeks out of the 6 weeks.
But don't get me wrong, there's value in discipline too.
Am I going to have to pay you for this session? I'm thinking about this. Like, I've identified that I have traumas. I've identified that I have poor sleep hygiene. I've identified that I set myself up to failure with the self-care. I make too much of it. So, yeah, am I going to have to pay you for this session?
You know what? If you want to offer me lunch or dinner, I am open to it. But I told you this is what I do. I just talk to people. I've always been this way my whole life. I just talk to people. And I encourage everybody to just talk to people. Like, we're always looking for solutions, especially like in the African-American community. I'm like, it starts with just talking. Just talk to people. Talk to the bucket boy on the corner. Ask him how his day was. Ask him if he's okay. Just talk to people. You just do not know, like, what difference that makes in somebody's life. The fact that you just took a second to acknowledge that they exist in the world and see how they're doing, to check in with them and see if they're okay. You just don't know. That could have stopped that guy from walking in butt naked and shooting some people. Exactly. If somebody maybe just asking the day before, like, how are you?
How are you? And
how
actually
going? Yeah. I think it's one of the biggest solutions to everything is just talking. Just getting the ball rolling with talking and starting a dialogue.
I love it. I love it. I love it. We've got to do better. It's like we have so many things, like what you said before, and that's going on in the world that's so big and overwhelming and disappointing and scary and creating fear. But also there are some other things that are small things that are significant that we could do to make ourselves feel better so that we can be fueled to do better.
Yeah.
And, taking care of our mental health is one of those things. So if somebody wanted to come and see you and wanted to just at least do, I want to call it a health check, if wanted to just do a mental health sanity check because they're feeling grief, anxiety, depression, and dealing with the loss or bipolar, you have a whole list of stuff. Schizophrenia.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to read your list. I just memorized it in my mind.
Yeah. I do couples counseling too, marriage counseling.
Okay.
Goes on.
How do they find you?
So you can either give me a call at our direct line, which is 872-212-3424, or you can also find me on Psychology Today, which is just psychologytoday.com, and look up Hyde Park Center for Healing or Jessica Kuhnen, which is Kuhnen.
Yes, I'm glad you spelled your last name.
Yeah, nobody can pronounce it. It's okay.
I was like, she didn't say her last name in the beginning, but I wasn't going to stop you.
It's okay. I'm not mad at you.
Okay.
It's just a name.
Okay. Thank you. But I really enjoyed this conversation, and I think it's very helpful for a lot of people. We're in a new time, we're in a new age, and we have to take care of ourselves. We have lots of veterans coming home. We have people who are experiencing lots of things that create stress and disorder, but we can have harmony. There are solutions, there are tools, there are people who can help you. Get a support group, check on yourself, take the action to just find out where you are to make sure you're leveled, that you have the right amount of sleep, the fitness, and you are eating properly. And if you need a little bit more, seek help if you don't have support. So we all are in this together. We want to help each other, and we want to connect and move forward. So thank you for listening, and have a happy Thursday. Get that mental health check and keep it moving. Good night.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, please, baby, please don't turn away.
No, you're right.